All right, guys, I really want to thank you for purchasing this product. This is going to be our route tree breakdown, okay? So we're going to be breaking down all routes on the route tree 0 through 9 and the different situations that you get with those routes when you got to run those routes and the different ways you can run those routes, okay? And the technique behind it mainly. So this is a good reference point for anybody who's trying to improve the details of route running. So we're going to be talking about mainly here, we're going to be talking about how to run each route against zone coverage and how to run each route against man coverage and some of the techniques you can use, which steps to go off of, right? And so that's what we're going to be focusing on here. So again, I really want to thank you guys for purchasing this product. It really means a lot to me. And let's get started with this breakdown. Again, if you guys have any questions on this, don't hesitate to reach out to me via email, via social media. We'll get back to you as soon as possible. So now we're going to be looking at this hitch route here. So this is going to be a hitch route against zone coverage, right? So you see how when he runs this hitch route, he's snapping down. I know it's a little bit tough to see, but he's snapping on that inside leg. So, right? So there's two different ways to run this hitch route. You could snap with your outside leg or you could snap with your inside leg, right? And so it's going to be off of like the second inside step that'll usually take you to 5 yards. So you see how he's here? That's his first inside, and then there's the second inside step, and he's snapping down. You're violent with your hips. So main thing about a hitch route, right? We're going to talk about the technical points of it. When you're here, let's say you're here, right? Let's say that's the wide receiver, like where Odell was, and then the corner's here. The whole goal before you get to that point is to sell vertical, right? So I got to make sure that I'm pushing vertical, trying to get that DB to turn his hips or to backpedal, and then I snap it off on that inside leg. But some of the key points here, your eyes got to stay forward, good pad level, I'm in stride, and I'm violent with my hips to just decelerate because you want to drop on the inside leg, pop the outside leg so you can just sit right there and you're sitting in that window for the throw, okay? So that's how you run a hitch route against zone coverage. I bursting up full speed, sell with my eyes forward, good pad level, everything. Then I snap on the inside leg, drop, pop, and I'm sitting there right now, okay? So now let's get into a route against man coverage. So we're going to be looking at this Mohamed Sanu route here. So you see how he comes off, he's pushing vertical, and he snaps with the outside leg, right? So when you snap with that outside leg, right, it's the same idea. You just want to snap, you want to be violent, and then you just want to pop those 2 steps off right in stride, right? So you could just sit there. But the whole key is to get this DB to turn his hips. Now, when we're coming off here and it's press coverage, again, the same principles apply as when it's zone coverage and I'm working this thing. I want to make this DB believe fade. I want to get him out of here. I want him to turn his hips, and I want him to run with me and commit those hips. So he thinks it's a fade. He's fully committed, and then I snap it off right in stride. Now, a technique that you can use is, and on a hitch route, fellas, real important that I take an outside release, right? It's tough to take an inside release and run a hitch because that guy's going to be on your outside. But let's say he's outside, way outside shade, and we got to take an inside release. That's fine. Just make sure it's the same concept. I'm trying to get him to turn his hips. I'm trying to get him to turn and run with me, and I snap it off right in the stride. In this case, too, fellas, he could have used an inside leg snap. He could have used that drop pop. But instead, he goes with the outside leg, which is fine. That's totally fine in this case. It's just there are 2 different ways to run it, right? 2 different ways, whichever you're more comfortable with, whichever you're more comfortable snapping down with. So you see when he's here, and what does he do? Does a great job of selling fade with his pad level. His eyes are forward. He's in stride with his lower half. That's what gets this DB to commit. Now, one thing that you can work is you can work this throw-by technique. So you see how he's here and he almost throws by this DB. DB kind of shot by, so we didn't really have to throw by necessarily as much. But chances are this DB is going to be hip-to-hip with you, and he's going to be running hip-to-hip, right in stride. So when I decide to snap with that outside leg, your inside hand, whichever hand's closest to him, has got to throw him by at the exact same time. So as I snap, I throw, almost like I'm pushing off of a wall to get this DB to shoot out of there, and I can create some separation. So that's 2 different ways to run a hitch route. Let's play both of those back full speed. So we're here, inside leg, drop, pop, and he's selling fade outside, snaps with the outside leg, and comes back to this ball. Great job. And also, fellas, if you're not taking notes on this right now, you're not writing down these key technical points about the hitch, we're going to go hitch, out, slant, then we're going to be going comeback, curl, then we're going to be going speed out, dig, then we're going to be going corner post, and then the 9 against man's coverage and against zone coverage. So all these are going to be talking about against man and against zone. So make sure we're taking notes, make sure we're writing this down, and make sure that we're actually learning from this rather than just hearing it one time and then forgetting about it, right? Because route running is all about details, very detail oriented, and that's what this video is mainly for. It's for the details of each route, okay? So now, we'll be looking at this out route against press man, quick out route, right? Like a quick little 5-yard out. So, or like a flat route. A lot of people call this a flat route. Now, or like an arrow. I know that's some terminology as well. So now against zones, pretty easy, right? If you're running a 5-yard out, like you're going here, you're going 5 yards and you just break into the out, you want to break off your second inside. So we don't have a video example of that, but it would be 4 steps. So it would be just you're stepping in here. So it'd be 1, 2, 3, 4. You're breaking off that and you're getting out. Make sure it's the same principle as the hitch. We're selling vertical. We're pushing up at him. If it's just like a 1-step flat route or a 2-step flat route, you just take 2 steps and just round it off right now. Okay. So against zone, it's not much technique to it. Okay. It's just making sure that we're selling fade. If in the event it's a 5-yard out, I got to push vertical. I got to, again, try to get this DB to turn his hitch. But if you're running a 5-yard out against zone coverage, especially from the slot, not going to be a whole lot of guys that you could run off. It's going to be more so a linebacker inside shade, right? So it all kind of depends, right, on coverage as well when it comes to these, when it comes to a slant and a quick out. But against zone, pretty simple. I know you guys are good with that. I don't think we need to talk about that. We're mainly focused on press just for these 2 clips. So now, when this DB's here, head up, right? Maybe he's trying to get physical. The key on a 5-yard out, right? It's hard to take an inside release on a 5-yard out, but we do right here. And what we call this is a threaten release or a dive release. So you see Claypool, we're going to play this full speed. He goes 1, 2, gets him off that platform, gets him to turn those hips, and now I'm out on this out route. So now, a couple different things that you could do. The whole goal when you're running a quick little 5-yard out or a quick little arrow against press is we want to make him think that I'm crossing his face, right? So especially if he's inside shade, what is he afraid of when he's inside shade? Somebody to cross his face and run like a drag across the field. He's got to chase a guy for 53 1/3 yards, right? That's what he's afraid of. So now, when I come off here and I give him this little hesitation and I cross his face just going 1, 2, 3, and I break off of those 3 steps. Yeah, this is like that 3rd step. That threatens him on this drag. So if we can make a DB think that I'm crossing his face, no matter what release it is, maybe it's like just a quick little double tap off the line, or you're selling like a wide step and you're throwing back to the inside, make him think you're trying to cross his face and then shoot this thing back out outside. So that's how you would run a quick little 5-yard out, right? That's this 3rd thing on the tree, or 2nd thing on the tree, the quick little 5-yard out against press coverage like this. Maybe a physical DB, I got to threaten that I'm trying to cross his face. Maybe I just come off and maybe I give him a little squirt release and I give him a 1, 2, and then I break back out. But something to make him think you're trying to cross his face to get his hips to commit. And now when you get his hips to commit, what does Claypool do right here? He works that same throw by. So it's very important that you combine your hands with your feet when you're working any kind of quick game situation like a hitch or a 5-yard out when you're trying to get this thing against man coverage. So let's watch this thing again full speed one more time. It's a great job working this 5-yard out with this threaten release. So 1, 2, get him to jump inside. Let's get up to the depth of the route and then go. And especially if you guys work this and let's say the depth of the route is at 5 and you do this dive at like 2 yards, make sure you push up vertical and get to that 5-yard spot so you can break it out and you're at the right spot for the quarterback. Okay, so now we already talked about it in zone, right? It's 4 steps. So now we're going to be looking at a slant here against man coverage. A little bit, this would work too also if he's inside shade, right? So just treat this as if he's maybe inside shade or head up. And so it's going to be a diamond release. This is something that I love when it's a 3-step slant. When it's a 1-step slant, different scenario, right? You would maybe come out and you would just step 1 hard step out here. They call that a wide step. So you'd step with your back leg, you'd step wide, try to get the DB off, and then I would just take this slant right now, okay? But now this is like a 3-step slant against man coverage, okay? So that's what this is focusing on. And now, if it's zone coverage, and let's say the DB's back here, I'm just going 3 hard steps, 1, 2, 3, and breaking on a slant right in front of him. So it's really not that complicated when it's against zone. So like I said, we're not going to spend too much time on that, but we're mainly going to be focusing on man coverage, okay? So the whole goal, because you're running, it's very similar to an out route, right? We're trying to make him think what? That I'm going on a fade. So we're trying to get him to turn those hips and try to get him to commit. So they call this a diamond release. This is kind of a variation of it because he kind of gives him a 1, 2. But a diamond release is 3 steps on a 45-degree angle to get this DB to turn his hips. So if I take 3 yard steps, so it's 1, 2, 3. You see how that gets the DB to turn his hips. Now, what gets him to turn his hips is that I commit my upper half, I commit my shoulders and my hips, because that sells like I'm actually going on this 45 and I'm going vertical. That makes this DB turn his hips. That makes him think we're just trying to race him to the back corner of the end zone here. And so that's what will get him to turn. Now, if he's getting hands on you, we know that to make this diamond release, I got to beat this inside hand because that's how I get to the inside. That's how I take an inside release. So make sure that we understand what hand we have to beat in this scenario too. So against press, when you guys got to run a 3-step slant, a diamond release is the correct release to use, right? And also it's because it times up correctly, right? You're not working this like fancy slide, working all these moves and then going, because that would be when you're like a 3rd read scenario. This is a 1st read. You're running a 3-step slant, 1st read scenario because the times up correctly with the quarterback because it's only 3 steps. Get that DB to turn his hips, and what gets him to turn his hips is my body language, my hips getting there, my shoulders getting there, and then I'm able to break out off of this 3rd step, okay? So it's like a little hesitation, then he takes 3 steps. Let's watch it again full speed. So he comes off here, 1, 2, 3, pop this off, get that DB to turn his hips, and then go. Okay, so now we're going to be looking at a comeback route. So against man coverage here, what do you think we need to do on a comeback route? We got to sell vertical, and a comeback is one of the only routes where I would say you must take an outside release. You got to really work to get an outside release, right? And if this DB is outside shade, we're probably not going to be throwing the comeback anyway. So what I got to make sure I do is sell vertical. You give him something off the line to hold him to the inside, okay? So if he's inside shade, you don't want to just run straight to the sideline. Reason being because he's just going to get hands and force you to the sideline. So if he's inside shade, give him something off the line, try to hold him there, and then I push up vertical. I try to get him to turn those hips and run with me downfield. So you see, that's exactly what we do here. We give him something off the line. We got to get him to this point. If I could get him chasing and I could sell vertical with my hips, with my shoulders, with my pad level, with my body language, and being able to stay in stride with my feet and actually run into this thing, that's what will create separation for me, because this DB's got to believe fade. And so now how I'm able to change direction, you guys already know this, is that I'm snapping on my inside leg. You see how he snaps with this leg right here, and your hips got to be violent. That's the whole key, right? Selling fade, trying to get this DB to commit his hips, and then I snap this thing off. So when you're against man coverage and you got to run a comeback route, the whole goal is to give this DB something off the line of scrimmage. Hold him to the inside, thread him to the inside so you can take this outside release. Maybe I work to restack a little bit, get this DB to commit to a fade, and then I snap it off. We want to make sure that we're snapping on my inside leg so you can snap. You could pivot with the second step, right? You could pivot. You could hook around with the third, and that third step can get you out of there. See, he takes about 5 steps because his hips weren't low enough, but it's the same concept, right? Now, the way that I tell my guys to go is their 4th inside step. That'll take you to about 15 yards, and on that 4th inside, that's when they snap down. They drop their hips, but against man coverage, the whole goal is to get this DB to turn his hips and run with you vertical. So that's how you run a comeback against man. Let's watch it again full speed, right? Inside shade, got to give him something to the inside so he doesn't just straight jam me to the outside. So let's watch it again full speed. So give him something inside, sell with your speed, sell with your pad level, maybe give a peek back, but the whole goal is to get the DB to commit his hips, and then I snap it off. Okay, so now we're going to be looking at a comeback route against a zone DB, right? How do we know it's a zone DB? Eyes are in the backfield. He's turned facing the quarterback. So what do we have to do on this? We want to make sure that we attack this blind spot and we attack his front hip, because those are the 2 weak points. So if I attack his front hip, that's going to force him to get out of there, right? And then if you attack that blind spot, that can force a speed turn because he thinks it's a fade, right? So every single route, it ties in the same thing, fellas. I got to sell fade. I got to make sure that I'm getting this DB to believe that I'm just trying to run around him, right? So what Jefferson does a great job of here is he sells fade with this kind of vertical set rocker step, and then he snaps it off, right? So he threatens this DB here with this just 1-2, because normally you work that 1-2, and you're going to see this when we go over a 9, when we go over a fade. This 1-2 right here, usually we go off a 1-2 and then just run a fade to the back corner of the end zone, and maybe I've worked that already, right? So it's all about attacking this front hip and trying to threaten this blind spot, because you see how this DB wants to turn open and go with the fade, and then where am I at? I snap this thing off, I drop my hips, and I get out of the break, and then I can run and win that race back to the ball. Against zone, it's all about right here. The separation is gotten with the acceleration. So being able to pump my arms, being able to run out of this thing, that's what widens the distance between me and this DB, and I can make this play. Okay, so that's something that you got to really focus on when you're running a comeback against zone coverage. Attack the front hip and attack that blind spot to get this DB off his block, right? So let's watch this thing again full speed one more time. So a comeback against zone. Weak hip, blind spot, make him think fade, keep the same speed, and let's get out of there. So he gives that vertical set, get to the blind spot, snap this thing off, and then we're out of there. Great job by Justin Jefferson. So now we're going to be looking at this. This is going to be like a stop route, but it's more so like a curl, because I know a lot of you run a stop, so it's the same principle as a curl. Then we're going to be looking at a curl against man coverage, which is kind of the wrong release, okay? So let's watch here. Zone coverage, right? Eyes in the backfield, facing the quarterback. We're coming off here. It's real important that we sell vertical, and again, where is he attacking? He's attacking that front hip. So against zone on a curl, what do I have to do? Attack the front hip. Let's try to get the DB to bail out of there. You see how he's facing like this. And this is what's going to create me separation. Being violent with my hips, being able to decelerate. So when you're running a curl against zone, same principles apply. 3 phases to every route. You got the stem, which is me selling vertical. You got phase 2, which is the break point, which is me creating energy and dropping on a dime. And then phase 3, because we just sit right there and catch. But so it's real important that we focus on decelerating on a stop route and your hips are violent. But if it was a curl like we're about to look at, phase 3 is running back to the ball, accelerating back to the ball. So against zone, it's real important that I do that, because that widens the distance between me and the DB, right? I got him off that platform by selling fade, attacking his weak hip, maybe working to that blind spot, then I snap it off suddenly. So that's how how you guys would run a curl or a stop route against zone coverage. Okay, so let's watch this thing again full speed one more time. So you want to attack that front hip, try to get him to turn those hips and bail, make sure I have good speed, and I snap it off suddenly because that's what decelerates me, and deceleration is so important against zone and acceleration. So watch him coming off here, selling vertical, going right at that weak hip, snap it off suddenly. Great route here by CeeDee Lamb. Okay, so now we're going to be looking at this route. It's a curl route against man coverage, right? So now, this DB, where's he at? He's kind of inside shade, right? Humphrey's a little bit inside shade, so I don't want to force the inside release and get walled into all this crap right here. So if I got to take the outside release, see how he kind of hesitates? DB's inside shade. Okay, I got to take the outside release. Take the outside release. Now on a curl route, when you're against man coverage and you have to take an outside release, what do you think you have to do? You obviously got to sell vertical, right? So that's the key. You got to sell fade. You got to try to get this DB to commit his hips. You got to try to get him to run, but me snapping this thing off violently with my hips is also another key, but throwing the DB by, right? So let's watch this thing again full speed. So you see how we're here, he's running stride for stride. I snap this thing off and I throw him by, and that's what makes him fall. And then what's he doing? He's creating energy at the top. Let's talk about this. We missed this throw, but you see how he snaps right in stride. It's a violent drop, right? And that gives that DB not enough time to react. He can't react that fast. So when we're selling fade and we get him to think, oh shit, we're going vertical, especially on a curl with an outside release against man coverage, that gets him to pop off. Now I'm here. I snap down violently. DB's taught to drop his hips too. DB's taught to decelerate. So what do I got to do? I got to swat him by. So same thing if you were to run a comeback with an inside release against man. I'd want to snap down, but I would want to throw by at the same time. Now, I'm creating energy with my hips. I'm decelerating. I'm getting separation, but I got to keep it. So what does he do? Acceleration. Phase 3 of the route. I got to come back to the ball. I got to run back to the ball. We missed the throw, but it's a great job working this curl with an outside release against man coverage. Now, if I were to take an inside release on a curl, right? So let's say he was to take this inside release, see the DB jumped outside, and I take the inside release, same principles apply. I snap it off, I accelerate back to the ball. All about selling fade, fellas, against zone and against man on every single route, especially on a curl and a comeback. I got to sell fade. Let's watch this thing again full speed one more time. So he comes off here. Great job pushing vertical, committing those hips, and then snapping it off right now, coming back to that ball. Great route. Okay, so now we're going to be looking at an out route. So now we're going to get to an out route, fellas, against man coverage, okay? Or not, excuse me, against zone, right? So how do we know it's zone? Eyes in the backfield, facing the quarterback, it's zone coverage. So what did I have to do on a comeback against zone? Weak hip, blind spot. And it's going to force a speed turn, right? So I got to self-fade, attack the weak hip, attack the blind spot, then be able to pop this thing off. And usually on a speed out, fellas, we want to go, this is like a deeper route, right? Like a 10 to 12 or like 8 to 12, somewhere in that range. I usually want to go off of my third inside step. So if you can break this thing off your third inside step, that'll get me some space. So now what Hopkins does here is you see how he works to that weak hip and then he snaps it off, right? And what does he do when he gets to that blind spot? Because again, when you're running a fade against zone, we're going to talk a lot about this. This blind spot is key right here. So you see how he's coming off, he gets to that blind spot, and what does that do? That forces the speed turn because the DB cannot see you right here. So if you can get to that blind spot against zone coverage when you got to run a speed out. If you're a slot receiver and let's say you got a safety over the top of you and he's about 12 yards up, let's say it's a too high safety look and you're a slot, you're running the speed out, it's all about just pushing vertical. It's all about just selling vertical, trying to get this safety to backpedal out of there. Same principles apply on a curl, right? On anything that we've covered, when you're a slot receiver and you're in zone coverage, you're going to have a linebacker inside shade of you. Just make sure that you get up to the route, you avoid getting rerouted, but selling vertical because that too high safety look is going to be that too high safety look right there is eventually going to turn into man coverage with the number 2 receiver. So if it's a basic 2x2 set, you're the slot receiver. It's all about making that safety believe that you're going fade rather than the corner in this case, right? But now this is a great job getting to the blind spot, selling vertical with his speed because your speed is what's going to make him speed turn and think, oh shit, I don't want to get beat over the top because in zone, what's his worst nightmare? Getting beat deep. So that speed is going to do it, being in this blind spot, and then what does he do? He just pops this thing off right now, and now when you get to that blind spot and you're able to create some separation right here, it's all about accelerating out of the break because what's he doing? He's speed turning. They call it a speed turn for a reason, so he's going to be breaking on that ball fast, so I got to make sure that I do my job of accelerating, obviously not to where I'm out of bounds, but then making this play. Great route here by DeAndre Hopkins. Let's watch it again, full speed one more time. Great job working at that blind spot, selling fade, and just popping this thing off right now. Great route. Okay, so now we're going to be looking, this is like what it would be against zone. This is more off man, but same principle, right? The guy's off. So what do I have to be able to do? You see how he comes off here? 1, 2, 3, fourth inside. He's just able to break this thing off on like a deep out. So you see how he's just here. He snaps this thing off. It's all about creating energy right here and accelerating when it's man coverage, right? My bad. Yeah. So this looks like zone, but it's really like off man, because when it's off man like this, you want to make sure that we're selling fade, trying to get this guy to bail out of there. And the DB does not play this thing bad, but when it's off man like this and you got to run this out, it's all about getting this guy to sit fade, getting that guy to backpedal. Then I break this thing off. It almost like he knew what we were going to be doing just based off of that stem. But you see how he's here in this DB's inside leverage, right? So against man coverage, when he's inside shade, and even when he's pressed and he's inside shade, you want to attack his leverage, because when you attack his leverage, that gives you more space to the sideline. But the reason why you wouldn't just run up and break to the out is because he's going to come and get hands and force you to that out route, and the quarterback's going to have no space to make this throw. So when I come off here against this off man look and I got to run this speed out, I want to square him up. I want to attack his leverage, try to get him to keep his leverage to the inside or backpedal, and then I create all this space for myself so I can accelerate out. Okay, so he goes off his fourth inside steps. You see how he's here? Attack that leverage, break this thing off. Now look at all this space I have to work back to the ball. I have all that space in the world to run after this thing, and the quarterback can just put it out there simply because I attacked his leverage. So when you get off man or even close press man and he's inside shade, attack his leverage. Let's get him off that block, and then let's break to the out, because that creates space for myself. The whole goal in man coverage when you're running an out route is that you want to create space for yourself to get back to the sideline and give that quarterback a nice good throwing window. So let's watch this thing again, full speed right here. So he's coming off, great job attacking leverage, breaks this thing off suddenly, accelerate out. It's all about selling fade, creating energy, and exploding out of the break. So now zone coverage, okay? So now he's facing here, facing quarterback. That's how we know that it's zone. So I got to run this dig route. Same principle applies for a slot who's running a dig, right? So you see how Judy's coming off here, running full speed, and he gives him this move, and then he kind of breaks this thing off suddenly, right? Again, how did we get this DB to speed turn? We got to this blind spot, right? So if we're off in this situation, especially if you're a slot and you're doing this on a safety, you want to close the distance with him as best you can. Obviously, the depth of the route matters. If it's a 10-yard dig, we can only sell fade for 10 yards because we got to give you a certain spot. If it's a 15-yard dig, I can sell fade to 15 yards. But you see, what we do is we have great speed. He gives him this vertical set, like rocker step right here, and then we just snap this thing off when he gets to that blind spot, right? And that forces that DB to speed turn. He thinks it's a fade, and then I'm off. So when it's zone coverage, if you're an outside receiver, like let's say you're here, wide receiver, corners off here, and he's facing here, you guys want to do the same thing. Attack that front hip, close the gap. You've got to close the gap when you run a dig against zone coverage, and then you maybe want to give him a vertical set to that blind spot. You maybe want to angle your stem to that blind spot to widen this DB out so he goes towards the sideline, or to force a speed turn, and then I could just snap this thing off on a dig. But make sure that you get to the correct depth of the route. A 10 to 12-yard dig, what I tell my guys to go off of is like their third inside step or their fourth outside step. So that's when they would make this break. But the most important thing when running a dig against a zone DB who's facing the field, or a strong safety or a free safety in a too high look, is closing the distance, make them think vertical to force a speed turn or a heavy back pedal, and then be able to snap this thing off correctly. Because against zone, quarterback's just expecting you to be in that window right now because it's zone. He's going to get this ball to you quickly, so make sure that I make my decision quickly and I manipulate this DB with my pad level, with my body language, and with my stem so I can get out of it quickly. Okay, let's watch this thing again, full speed one more time. Great job coming off here, getting to that blind spot, forcing the speed turn, then accelerating out. Okay, so now we're going to be looking at this dig route here from Devontae Adams against press, right? So now I got like kind of an inside shade DB, head up, right? Same principles. Now I want to take the inside release. So if I want to take an inside release on a dig and he's head up like this, what do I got to get him to do? I got to get him to move off this platform to create this lane for me, right? So if I give him this quick little 1-2 off the line, so you see how he gives him this just quick 1-2, and you see how much he's selling to the outside to get this DB here, you guys understand that to get an inside release and run a dig and against press, all I got to do is beat his inside arm. Because if we get him outside of his frame here, and you see how we're stepping outside of his frame with this leg, this arm is the only thing that I got to beat to get his hips to lock. And you see how Adams just rips underneath right here, and then he's able to work back to the top of the break. And you see he could restack, he could give a little move here and go back underneath, or he could just get to the depth of the route and come off. And now, when you're a first read throw, when Aaron Rodgers is getting this ball to you on the first read, and it's maybe like you got to get there, something quick off the line will do. Anytime you guys got to run a dig, fellas, like when you got to run a dig dig against press. You don't want to give him this like hesitation, all these fancy moves, and then go. You want to give him something quick like this, right? I want to give him something quick, just 1-2. He shoots that arm. You know that you just got to beat that inside arm and take the inside release. I get that inside arm, and you see how his hips lock, right? Now, he might have safety help. If he has safety help, hell yeah, let's set him up to the outside. Let's make him think that I'm going outside because he's going to be anxious to jump outside because he's got safety help here, but I don't think he does. It's just a great release by Adams. Great job getting this DB off his frame. Now, what would you do? Like, let's say he was way inside shade. You'd give him a move to the inside, take the outside release, work to restack, give him a move at the top, or work that throw-by technique where you're throwing by on this shoulder. So that's how you can run a dig against press man, against man coverage, okay? So I hope that makes sense. I hope that kind of give you guys kind of some insight on what to do against press when you got to run a dig. So if you're going to take an inside release, make sure that we're setting him up outside. You can just beat that inside arm. If he's way inside shade and you want to take an outside release because you have to, you don't want to force this and get rerouted, right? That's what a lot of people do. They force it. Give him something to the inside. I push up vertical. I get him to turn those hips, and I either snap it down and throw him by. I work to restack over the top of him and give him a move at the top, like a square cut maybe, or just like a quick little 1-2, or just a heavy jet or a heavy cut to the outside. So watch the thing again, full speed. Again, depth matters on this thing. Depth 100% matters. It's a great job by Adams. Now let's get to this next clip here. So now we're going to be talking about a corner route against zone, right? So most important thing, corner against zone. I teach third inside step, but we're going to be looking at Rieger here, and he kind of just squares up this DB and works this rocker step, right? So again, this is like a safety. This ties into like what slots can do when you got to run a corner against a too high safety look, or like an outside receiver when you got to take this like kind of shadow corner where you take this inside release way to the inside to try to square up this this safety, right? Because it's like a cover 2 situation, 2 high safeties. They got this deep half, and we want to hit this corner right between the window, right between this corner and that safety. That's where we want to put the ball as a quarterback. So we got to make sure that when we come off here and it's zone coverage, we got to attack this dude. We want to attack that safety. We want to square the safety up. So like he's got a midline, right? The midline goes down the middle of his body. I want to attack that midline. I want to go straight at him. I want to square him up. I want to attack him right now and then give him a move at the top. So you see Rieger works with just this like rocker step. You see how he sells with his upper half. That's what gets that DB to jump. And then I'm out on this corner route, right? So it's really important, fellas, that when you're going against a too high safety look and you got to run a corner route, if it's one high safety and it's like cover 3, don't even worry about it. Just get into the route. You don't have to give him a move. But when you go up against 2 high safeties, it's so important that you go at him, you attack him. We sell fade. We sell like we're just going to be squaring him up and running straight through him, and then I give him my move, whether it's a heavy indicator cut on your inside leg or whether it's a rocker step, whether it's a triple rocker. But against a zone coverage safety, it eventually turns into man coverage. So we got to make sure that we square him up, got to try to get him to turn those hips and think fade, and then I'm able to break this thing off and accelerate back underneath him. Okay, so that's how you would run a corner against zone. Let's watch it again full speed one more time. Rieger does a great job coming off. Throw that 1-2, and let's make sure I win that race back to the ball. That's a great job by Rieger. Okay, so now we're going to be talking about a corner against press. So DB's inside shade, so I necessarily wouldn't have gone with this release, but I wanted to include it because we got an inside release on this DB. But if this DB, normally what you would do, and I think they're working something here where they couldn't take an outside release, so that's fine. But see how this DB's inside shade? Why would you just not run a corner straight there? Because same principles as everything, like we were talking about on that comeback, on that out route. If he's inside shade like this, he's just going to get hands and wall you to the sideline and screw up the spacing, screw up the timing with the quarterback. So I got to make sure that maybe I give him a move to the inside here. So I give him like just a quick little right, left, something to hold him on the inside. Obviously, this isn't focused on releases. This is focused on technique against man and zone coverage. But if I give him something to hold him here, maybe to get him to jump, maybe I threaten like I'm trying to cross his face because why is he inside shade? To take away the inside, try to move him off that block, take the outside release, work to restack, and then give him a move. But we'll watch what this receiver does. So he sets him up outside, takes this inside release. He could have worked to restack a little bit better here. But when you take an inside release, that's why I wanted to include this clip. When you set him up outside and you get this DB2 jump, because you see how anxious he is to jump to the outside and get hands because we sold with my upper half off the line. When you guys take an inside release on a corner, make sure that we're working to restack. We're working to get back over the top of this DB. I'm not standing super tall, so I bow this thing out wide. Make sure that I'm working to restack. He's trailing my back hip. Then I could give him a rocker step. I could give him a heavy indicator cut, whatever it might be. So make sure that when you take an inside release against man coverage, you're running a corner, get to the top of him. Restack this guy or get to his hip. If he's running hip to hip with you, what's something you could do? If this guy's running hip to hip with me, I could throw him by. I could throw him by with my inside hand. I could swat his shoulder. I could swat his hip, break back underneath, and get up to that corner. Okay, so it's all based on knowing the situation, knowing what to do, and knowing when you want to take an inside or an outside release. But on a corner route, super important that you work to restack when you're against man coverage. Just watch this thing again, full speed one more time. Hope that made sense. Hope that gave you guys some value on just a corner route and how to kind of structure this thing. So great job here making this stick and then being late with your hands over the top. That's great work right there. So now we're going to be talking about a post route against zone. So what do I want to do on a post route against zone? Same principles apply as always on zone. What does Adams do right here? He's coming off, attack that front hip, attack that blind spot. Why? Trying to force that speed turn. So when you got to run this post, whether it's a bang 8 post, whether it's a deep post, and you're in zone, eyes to the quarterback, face the quarterback, kind of trying to stay over the top, trying to stack you, we want to attack his hip, want to threaten that blind spot, because if I threaten that blind spot and I force him to widen out or I force a speed turn, that creates all kinds of separation right here for me. So that's a great route by Adams. That's how you guys run a post against zone coverage. So that DB's off, facing the quarterback, I'm running at him, much like anything else. I'm attacking his front hip. Then I maybe work to that blind spot, try to force a speed turn. I break this thing off, and then I take this post over the middle. So make sure, again, zone coverage, same principles. I attack his front hip, try to get him off, try to close the distance, try to really force a heavy back pedal or a heavy run out of him. I threaten that blind spot by either angling my stem or giving a hard cut there, forces the speed turn, then I break back on this post. So great job by Davante Adams working this post route, right? So we're almost finished with this video, guys. We're going post, and then we're just going to get to a 9, right? So we're coming out here, attack that weak hip, get to that blind spot, then I accelerate out. That's a great job here by Adams. Great job making this catch as well. So now let's talk about a post route against man. Outside shade. What does that mean? He's got safety help, right? So what do I want to do? Because he's outside shade, right? He's outside shade right here. If he's outside shade like this, fellas, we want to take the inside release, obviously, right? But if he were to be inside shade, we can still take the outside release on a post when it's against man coverage. So it's really just about knowing, like I said, knowing the situation, knowing what this DB is going to do ahead of time based on coverage to structure your release, right? So when it's a post route, outside shade, all right, that's fine. Let's set him up outside. You see how he gives this jab, something to hold him there so he just doesn't just completely reroute me. That's why I wouldn't just run. But something to hold him there, get him freezing, work those hands, work back over the top, make that post route. And when we work to restack, we got to give him something aggressive at the top. I got to give him a move like a heavy indicator cut or a rocker step. This receiver doesn't do that, but that's what we got to do when he's outside shade. If he's outside shade, you give him something. You just don't run straight there because that's how he reroutes me. That's how he's all over me. I need an explosive release, something to sell like I'm trying to go outside shade right now because he's outside shade. He doesn't want to get beat to the outside, so that's what's more likely to make him jump. I can get some separation, and I can get this ball in that window. Let's watch this thing full speed one more time. So if he's inside shade as well, fellas, I would give him something inside, an inside move. Like if he's really taking it away, I can't take an inside release. I'd give him an inside move, break to the outside, either work to restack and then give him a move and run a post, or work a throw by. He's hip to hip with me. I throw him by. I break back underneath him. Okay, so that's what we got to be able to do when it's man coverage. You got to run a post. Watch the thing again, full speed. So great job coming off here and breaking that thing off and catching this thing over the middle, but making sure that we got to give him something at the top of the route when it's man. All right, so now we're going to be looking at this fade route against zone. So this is that vertical set that we were talking about on everything that we looked at zone coverage-wise. So what do we got to do? Any route against zone. Close the distance. How do we know it's zone? Eyes are in the backfield. Hips are towards the quarterback. So what do I got to do? I got to close the distance, try to sell post. They call that a vertical set. Sell like I'm trying to cross the space and then get to that blind spot and go. So this is what sets up everything that we talked about today based off of zone coverage. So let's watch this thing again. He's coming off here, gives this head fake to the inside, gets him to jump, and now where am I at? I'm in that blind spot. I'm in that area that I threaten when I got to run a comeback, when I got to run an out route, when I got to run a dig route, when I got to run a post. Against zone coverage, now I'm doing the actual thing that forces this DB out of there, right? So that's a great job here by Allen working this they call us a vertical set. So it's that one hard step to the inside, selling like I'm going post. I got to make sure that I throw my upper half because, again, DB's eyes are in the backfield. He's looking at the quarterback because it's zone, right? So when he's looking at that quarterback here, he's going off the field. So if he can feel me go to the inside, if I could throw my body to the inside and sell with my upper half, that's what's going to get him to jump on this thing. That's what's going to get him to commit because he's not even looking at me. He's not watching my hips. So make sure that we're throwing my body. Make sure we're closing the distance to try to force a back pedal out of him to sell post. Everything about this has got to look post, and then I get to that blind spot that sets up everything because, right, I take that one step, then I get to this blind spot, and then I break it off. He's doing a speed turn, then then I break it off and run an out route. I break it off and run a comeback. I break it off and run a dig. But now's the actual thing that sets up all of that, right? So that's what you do when you got to run a fade against zone. You attack it, give him that vertical set to the inside, and work to get to that blind spot and get over the top and beat him to the outside. It's a great job here by Allen. Let's watch this thing again, full speed one more time. So coming off here, sell with that vertical set to the inside. Great job selling post and then breaking back to the outside. Great route there, attacking zone coverage against running a fade against zone coverage. Now we're going to be talking about a fade against man. So obviously, inside or outside release applies. This DB's inside shade, so what am I going to do? I'm going to take an outside release. So I got to give him something quick to the inside, try to get him to hold there, or try to move him off the platform, right? So it's all about just giving a release that threatens the inside because he's inside shade. So if he's inside shade, I don't want him to just wall me to the outside, so don't just take it. Got to give him something there and make sure I take this outside release. Now, it's important that when we work this thing, we're not hugging the sideline. So your hand technique is super important off the line. Work my hands. Don't let him touch you so we can work to almost restack, or I'm not just, the whole goal is not to hug the sideline with an outside release. Now, let's say this deep, so obviously, like, it's not focused on releases. It's just more so what to do. So any kind of release that gets this guy inside shade, moves him inside, moves him off that platform, but it depends on what read you are. If you're a last read, which normally what a fade is not a last read because the quarterback's not going to throw this thing late down the field, you could work something a little bit slower, but something quick is more recommended. So like a quick double up, a quick speed release, a quick little shuffle and go. That's what holds this DB to the inside right here. So you could push vertical, you get to the outside, and then I can go, right? So now let's talk about this scenario where he's where he's outside shade and you got to run a fade. Or maybe he's head up and you work like a little hesitation. He jumps to the outside. Okay, fine. Take the inside release. But when you take an inside release on a fade against man coverage, it's real important that you work to restack. So when you take this fade, you move him off that platform. He jumps outside. Okay, I'll take the inside release, but make sure you restack. Nothing worse than running this fade and your spacing's off, especially if it's a 4 vertical concept. You want to make sure that you're on the numbers. Let the quarterback throw you between the numbers and the sideline. So against man coverage, and you got to run a fade. So important that you give him something quick off the line. You make sure that you hold him inside or outside shade. You take the outside or the inside release, but you work to restack. You work and you have that full speed mentality that sets up everything else that we do. So this fade route is what sets up all your other routes that you run. So you want to make your releases look the same. You want to make your pad level look the same. You want to make the stride look the same. And that's how you get separation on routes 0 through 8. When you're selling vertical, because that brings me to all my points that I talk about. It's all about the 3 phases: selling fade, creating energy, and accelerating. But selling fade is the most important because that's what gets the DB to turn his hips, and that sets up everything. So that's how you build off of this. Watch it again, full speed one more time. And another main thing about catching the ball when it's man coverage and you got to run a fade, make sure your hands are late. Make sure we're not showing my hands too early unless I got to slow down and high point it. Make sure my hands are late so the DB doesn't have as much time to react on this thing, okay? All right, guys, I really want to thank you for watching this video. I really appreciate it. I hope this gave you some value. I hope you guys took some notes. I hope you guys learned how to run a hitch, out, slant, speed out, dig, curl, comeback, post, corner, and fade against zone and against man coverage. I hope you guys can take a lot of this with you. Knowing what to do is sometimes better than knowing how to do it, right? Anybody can learn the skills. Anybody can do the drills. Anybody can know the things to do, but do you know when to do it? And that's what I wanted to accomplish with this video, breaking down the steps, breaking down everything that you need to do, okay? If you guys have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. Again, I really appreciate you purchasing this product, and I'll see you guys next time.